Okay, so where do we come from? I touched on this basically a little bit in my lecture, but the scientific viewpoints for where we come from always kind of have butted heads with either evolution or religious. And the scientific viewpoints are starting to push the notion that life more than likely arose on Earth from panspermia, that somehow life arrives whole and complete. There isn't enough time on the evolution of Earth scale, 4.5 billion years, something like that, 4.7, for life to have just whimsically come together in primordial soup and a lightning bolt striking it, and all of a sudden there's life. So one of the theories they're starting to push is that possibly life actually arrived at Earth whole and complete. So this is pushed further with the research that we've done by looking at asteroids and comets, things where we've actually sent out things in space with an aerogel catcher and collect fragments and debris from these, and found, wow, here's carbon, and many of the minerals and things that we need for life to get started are found floating around in space and arrive here in the form of comets and asteroids. So one of the things that we can really start to look for with our science is to start to confirm life beyond just Earth. And one of those environments that could be very hospitable to life is one of the moons of Jupiter, called Europa. Now, the reason why this is really interesting is many of the other moons, Ganymede, Callisto, there's four major moons of Jupiter, but Ganymede and Callisto have extensive volcanic activity. And Europa, as you can see here, has extensive water. Now, the surface is covered by a a very thick ice sheet that you can see. It's cracked here, and it's kind of like, almost like plate tectonics here on Earth, where the ice is always kind of shifting, and so it gives us a view of how this planet is working. But interestingly enough, Europa has a 40-mile deep ocean below this ice. So they theorize if we're able to, and we are, there's a mission coming up in 2007 to do just this, if we do penetrate this ice sheet and go down to the surface of the ocean on Europa, there could be processes taking place just like they're here on Earth. When we go way down into the ocean, no sunlight whatsoever, there are these vents emanating hot minerals and sulfur and various other elements where life is thriving. So you wouldn't think it would be possible without sunlight or heat, but here at the bottom of the ocean, where there's thermal vents exist, there's life thriving. So we just apply that same science to, here we have another ocean on one of our moons of Europa. Maybe this is a possible good habitable place for life to evolve as well. So as we look at the more specifically how we came into the picture, there's this overriding theory of the missing link. That everything so simplistic is going to become more complex, but for whatever reason, science has not been able to connect us to the Neanderthal man. So there's been all these successions of the hominoid, but nothing that can actually put us in a connection with them. So that they say that there's a missing link. At some point we're going to find some species that actually connects us to the Australopithecine and all these various other Neanderthal men that evolution says we come from. So when we look at many of these structures all over the Earth, Stonehenge and Egypt and Giza, we start to realize that there was a brilliance being displayed by ancient man that we don't attribute to them. That using stone tools and living in clay huts, for the most part, they weren't able, as we would reckon, to be able to build such devices. But we still have all around the world evidence of them building and having a technology to build structures that we still can't even duplicate. And as an example here, we're looking at a quarry. There's a gentleman here. It's actually, his name is Ted. He's one of our people selling videos in the in the other room. But he went on a trip where this is a quarry, and this is Baalbek in Lebanon. You can see another gentleman standing here by the rocks. And interestingly enough, these rocks, they're called trilithoton stones. They weigh like hundreds of tons. And this one was left at the quarry site, slightly broken, but it was 5 miles away from where they took these things into Baalbek and stacked them. So interestingly enough, they had the ability to cut out these rocks and quarry them out and move them 5 miles, where we still yet today don't really have technology that can cut a perfect rock out of the ground and move it, So it's very interesting that there are a lot of these types of artifacts around the world that show us that ancient man was somehow utilizing a type of technology that we still can't get our hands on how they were doing it. So one of the areas that's really sparked my interest in looking at all these structures, Giza, Nazca, Stonehenge, Machu Picchu, Tiwanaku, I really started to want to know, well, who's the first culture? Where does all of this come from? And this led me to the culture that we have evidence of that came literally right out of the Stone Age, where modern-day Iraq is, known as Mesopotamia, Babylon. But the first culture to show up there were called Sumerians. And this is right between the Tigris and Euphrates. That strip of land there, it's kind of hard to see. It's called Mesopotamia. But then Mesopotamia, Babylon, that's today's Iraq. And this culture has left us artifacts in the form of stone tablets, pictograms, some of their monuments that still exist. But for the most part, their evidence exists in two forms. One of them is a clay tablet, and another one is called a cylinder seal. What the Sumerians devised was an ingenious way of being able to have kind of like an ancient printing press, where what they would do is they would reverse carve a picture into this round cylinder seal. Now, scholars today still are baffled as to how they were able to carve in reverse such accurate pictures so that when you would roll it over wet clay, it leaves the positive imprint. So we have a lot of this information that was disseminated by the Sumerians on a daily basis about events, courts, laws, judges, schooling. So all of these things they recorded on stone tablets, and they also had a written language that was called cuneiform script. It consisted of over 400 characters, and it was basically like an oversized screwdriver that they would twist and turn it and make all these little characters called cuneiform script. Now, an alphabet with over 400 characters is pretty complex, and it's very interesting that the Sumerians, literally right out of the Stone Age, show up and are bequeathing us information that literally over 100 of the firsts needed for a modern culture came from the Sumerians. One of those things was mathematics. They had a base math of 6 and 10. Now, usually people would just round this off to say 60, sexagesimal, but it was actually the number 6 and the number 10 separately so that they could do very large and very small integers. They were the first ones to devise a metric system. They were the first ones to give 12 inches to the foot, 360 degrees to the circle, 12 hours in a day, 12 months in a year, 60 seconds. All of these were derivatives of the number 12 and also the number 6. That number 12, though, is a key point that I'll stress here as you'll see as we go on. So myth or facts, one of the great scholars that we have who's really divulged into this research, now at 83, his name's Zachariah Sitchin, and he's one of the pinnacle researchers as a linguist of about 220 people in the world, 220 in the whole world that can actually directly read Sumerian cuneiform script.